You're watching an NDTV exclusive. Are social media platforms responsible gatekeepers of information and of the privacy of their viewers? How do they balance their business interests of growing in one of the world's biggest markets with pressures from ruling regimes? As elections loom in India, Ajit Mohan, MD of Facebook India, joins us on the show. Thank you so much indeed, Ajit Mohan, for joining us. There's so much to talk about with you, and as always, time is limited, so let me get straight down to it. Let me just start, Ajit Mohan, with the new IT rules, which bring together some of the concerns that I mentioned in my introduction. Now, you're one of the few heads of prominent digital platforms that have actually come out seemingly in support of the IT rules. You told the Times of India in an interview in June that the rules make sense. They provide a framework of accountability. It's important to have rules around harmful content. How does this square off, Mr. Mohan, with the fact that your own sister concern, WhatsApp, has actually taken the government to court saying that the rules are actually going to impinge on the privacy of users, something that Will Cathcart, who's the CEO of WhatsApp, has just repeated in an interview just a few days ago, saying that it undermines traceability and compromises user privacy?
Mr. Jain, thank you for the question and great to be here. I think it's important to step back and think about how we responded to the new rules as a company, as Facebook as a company, across our family of apps, which includes Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp.
Sure.
I think we've been saying for a while that the early years of the internet saw explosive innovation without a lot of traffic lights guiding rules and regulations. And not just in India, but around the world, Mr. Jain, we have advocated that the internet itself, the open internet, will benefit from greater clarity,
yes,
including new rules governing both platforms and in terms of
there's no
what
doubt.
is allowed and not allowed.
No, that's fine. It's of course there should be gatekeeping, but I'm just trying to square off your seemingly being in favor of the rules with the fact that, as I said, your sister concerns have a problem with it, because I was wondering, Facebook's own Messenger app is also likely to be undermined with end-to-end encryption if the new rules kick in. Is it not?
Yeah, I think if you will allow me to just paint you the whole picture. I was speaking on behalf of the company, Mr. Jain, not just on behalf of Facebook app, including WhatsApp. And I'll come to the question that you asked on traceability and the challenge that we made in the court. Across our family of apps, we have been clear that we respect Indian law, and we signaled clearly when the new rules came in that we were going to try and comply with the new rules, except for the one area around traceability on WhatsApp.
Okay.
And even there, what we have done is use the legal framework in India to ask the courts the question in terms of what is the implication of traceability, and we clearly have a disagreement there. But even when we were disagreeing with one particular element, and you will see that WhatsApp itself has complied with many other elements of the new rules that were introduced.
Okay.
We were relying on the legal framework in India to get greater clarity. And I am aligned with that. I'm aligned with that view, Mr. Jain, that we do believe that there's a particular question on encryption and privacy that requires clarification from the courts.
Okay, so it's on that one aspect that you're concerned. Twitter, which is another prominent social media platform, has gone beyond that. They actually, as you must have seen their statement, they put out a statement saying the new rules represent a dangerous overreach that is inconsistent with open democratic principles.
I think, Mr. Jain, the good part of my role is that I get an opportunity to shape Facebook's response as well as to defend Facebook's approach. I will let my friends at Twitter make their own arguments.
But you don't agree. I'm saying you don't feel that the rules overall give the government excessive control over social media platforms.
I think we've been clear. I think we have a shared agenda here in terms of the safety and security of people in India and around the world that we have been leaning into as a company, not just here, but everywhere. And we looked at the rules and we were clear that we were aligned with the agenda of enhancing user safety.
Okay.
We respect Indian law.
Right.
And where we had a particular disagreement where we believe that the courts have a role to play in clarifying the point of view on privacy, which was around traceability on WhatsApp.
Okay.
We have leveraged the Indian legal framework to ask that question.
Okay. Yes, you've gone to court on that. Let's now come a little bit, Mr. Mohan, to the context of the rules, because as you know, laws don't operate in a vacuum. It's both letter and spirit. And there are worries that the government, and this is not just true of this government, but governments in general, are less concerned about regulating hate speech or disinformation or any of that, and more concerned about ensuring that when it comes to their own potential hate speech or disinformation, that gets a free pass. Everything else can get regulated, not their own. Take the case of Twitter, where, as you're aware, the Delhi police sent its anti-terror squad to visit their offices simply because they had flagged the tweet of a ruling party spokesperson as manipulated content. So does that a concern? The context.
I think again, 2 or 3 things here, Mr. Jain, and I'll answer the question directly. One is, I think when it comes to limiting hate speech or speech calling for violence, we're pretty clear and we're transparent in articulating our community guidelines that clearly state what kind of content is allowed on our platforms and is not allowed. And the legal framework in India allows a platform like us to articulate those policies and to enforce them objectively. The second point is, I do believe that Facebook is a company, and if you look at the broader internet ecosystem in India, we have benefited from the openness of India. We have benefited from the fact that India has helped create an open internet that has allowed companies like us to thrive. It has allowed many others to thrive. And lastly,
yes.
I think, as you have seen, the very fact that where we have a particular area of disagreement, where we believe that traceability on WhatsApp will fundamentally change the product and the promise that we make in privacy to users, we have gone to the court. So I think our approach on this is quite clear.
My question was different. My question was about government intent, not about the legal framework, but about government intent, about how ruling regimes often are selective about what they think should be flagged as disinformation or hate and what shouldn't be, and whether that brings pressure to bear on social media intermediaries. I cited a concrete instance of what happened to a platform like Twitter. But on the wider point, though, as you said, that you think that you have been very clear that whenever you feel something is hateful, you flagged it, and you think that there's a kind of openness in India. I do want to refer to the ANKHI Das episode, which was reported in the Wall Street Journal, who's your former public policy director. And I know that you've issued statements about it, Facebook, which are somewhat generic in nature. They say that, you prohibit hate speech and all your policies are politically neutral. But the report cited very specific instances of concern, Mr. Mohan, which I was hoping you could address, which says that despite the insistence of Facebook's employees responsible for policing your platform to permanently ban the profile of a BJP leader who was doing hate speech, Ms. Das blocked applying those rules to him because she said this will hurt Facebook's business interests in India. Now, did this happen or did it not happen?
No, and I think, Mr. Jain, I think the Wall Street Journal article was 13 months ago, and I think I've spent at least a lot of those 13 months clarifying what does happen and doesn't happen in the company.
Okay.
But I'm glad to have the opportunity to reiterate that. A couple of things, Mr. Jain. One, we do enforce our policies in a non-partisan, objective manner. Okay. I think, as you can imagine yourself, a platform like ours can be only credible when we're true to the spirit of our founding and a mission that we consider quite important, which is I don't want to interrupt. There has to be openness for expression of all kinds, but not expression that in any way violates our community guidelines, including hate speech. Second, I think to directly answer your question,
yes,
no one individual in the company has the power to essentially say you should not do enforcement of our policy. And I think that was what was flawed about the characterization of internal conversations, was that the process is set up for multiple voices to feed in and to give more context about things that are happening in India or in other parts of the world.
I saw,
but
Mr. Mohan.
No individual has the power to block enforcement.
Mr. Mohan, I saw that. I saw that statement saying no individual has the power to block enforcement. But in terms of the sequencing of what happened, the report came out, and it was only 2 months, I think, or 2 weeks after that, or some short while after that, when that actual leader was banned, indicating that had the report not come out, what Ms. Das had taken as her position, that he shouldn't be banned because it would hurt Facebook's business interests, would have stood.
I think there are two parts to it. I think one is that, and I think you've seen this, that in a world in which conversations that are in progress get exposed, it's easy to assume that something happened because of internal conversations being leaked.
Right.
But I think every day we have these conversations, not just in India, but around the world. And because I've had exposure to it and I've been a stakeholder in it, I feel good about the integrity of the process. But I think it's also important to address, I think, what you're implying, that in some way it is not in our business interest for us to do what is right.
Right.
And I disagree with that. I don't think anyone wants hate speech on our platforms. I don't think it's in our business interest for users to be exposed to hate speech. I think if anything, if you look at where governments and other stakeholders have leaned in around the world, they're clear that they want us to act as well. So I think our business interests, or to be even cruder, our financial incentive is very biased in favor of doing the right thing on our platform.
But I fully agree with you that it wouldn't, I mean, one would assume that it's in no one's interest, business or otherwise, to have hate speech. But that's the point about all of this, which is still not clear, whether that there was internally from a fairly senior official pushback against removing hate speech. I mean, it was finally removed after the article came out. But whether there was such a view taken, because that would be problematic. And I guess the next question would be, was that something which actually was of concern internally for you? Did you take any steps after that to say, listen, this is something that, you know, perhaps shouldn't have happened. We need to find ways of putting in place systems to prevent repeats?
I think the systems are in place. Okay. And I think this is the point that I'm trying to make, that the systems are in place to get inputs from multiple stakeholders, both in India and outside.
Okay.
And the process is set up for us to be thoughtful and deliberate.
Right.
And neither was it the case then, nor is it the case that any single person has that kind of power on enforcement action, including on blocking.
Okay. Mr. Mohan, you still not specifically answered my question. Did that happen or not? Did ANKHI Das actually say, don't remove that post because it will hurt our business interests?
I'm not trying to avoid it. I think it is just that I wasn't a part of every conversation. And I think when you take a selective conversation and expose it and make a headline out of it, I don't think it gives color to deliberative discussions that happen. But I would be surprised if, there was any openness to any person holding that point of view or even articulating that point of view. Okay.
But overall, Mr. Mohan, you believe that there is an environment which allows you to function without any pressure from the government or other important stakeholders who exert influence over social media platforms? Because remember, political parties, governments, place great currency in social media. This is how they get their message across, rightly or wrongly. Are you saying that the environment in India is devoid of that? Or is there actually pressure?
I wouldn't call it pressure. I think, Mr. Jain, to be honest, I think there are two, three things here. One is there is scrutiny, and that scrutiny is not just from the government in India. It is from all kinds of stakeholders, including journalists like you. And I don't think it is just limited to India. I think the scrutiny for Facebook as a company is across stakeholders globally.
Right.
And I actually believe that that scrutiny is right. And it happens because, as you yourself are saying, I think we are a consequential platform. I think we play an important role, not just in expression, not just in people staying connected to each other around the world, but increasingly we are a platform used by small businesses to find markets and opportunities around the world.
Right.
And therefore, I absolutely think it is right that there be scrutiny to make sure that we are doing the right thing, that we are being objective, that we are being non-partisan, and that we are enforcing our own policies.
Okay.
And I feel good that that's what we do. I do think we can continuously improve. I think it's a very reflective organization that thinks about how do we raise the bar, especially because of the very particularly special and consequential role we play in the world. I think that's right.
Okay, but when you say you like or you're open to scrutiny, why is it then that you've been avoiding appearing before the Delhi government, which set up a panel to probe the role of social media in the Delhi riots?
I think, Mr. Jain, I assume that you're very well aware of the nuances on that case, which did involve particular elements of separation of powers between the center and the state. And I think it again goes to where we started this conversation with, where we do believe there is a clarity needed. It's true for Trace on WhatsApp. I think it was particularly true in the case of the summons from the Delhi Assembly. We saw that clarity, and we did believe that it was an issue that was not just particular to us, but it applied to the private companies in general.
Okay.
And it applied to the relationship between the center and the state as well.
Okay. So you're saying there are jurisdictional issues there, but overall, Mr. Mohan, how have you found operating now under these new IT rules? Because the rules have kicked in, I believe, somewhere around May. Have you appointed a compliance officer or a grievance officer? And have you been overwhelmed with grievances and complaints?
I think we've been public about not just the compliance with the appointment of officers, Mr. Jain, but also through our monthly reports. We provide disclosure consistent with the new rules in terms of what we are seeing across the platform. But again, I think what you see as a particular event, I tend to see this in the context of what's happening around the world, that tech platforms play an increasingly important role. And I think it comes with scrutiny. And I do think, and I've mentioned this before, that more traffic lights on the internet, that's a good thing. And I think we benefit from it. The ecosystem benefits from it. And I also do think that we have the opportunity to engage with the government in India, Mr. Jain, as well as government from around the world, where we try and share our thoughts in terms of, where are rules helpful? It'll be helpful if open democratic societies like India create interoperable frameworks with the European Union and the United States, for example. And all of this in the context where we must find ways to make sure that these rules don't stifle the explosive innovation that's happening in India and in other parts of the world that is driving prosperity.
At the moment, though, are you satisfied with the way you're growing? These are some numbers that we have. Tell me if they're wrong. That Facebook has about 41 crore, which is about 400 million users in India. WhatsApp 53 crores. Instagram 21 crore. India is Facebook's biggest market by audience size, surpassing the US. And your revenues grew 43% year on year from about 1,277 crore in 29-20. Net profit doubled more than 135.7 crore.
I think, as all the numbers indicate, I think there are two things that I would call out, Mr. Jain. One is that, yes, absolutely, our platforms are growing. We are very deeply immersed in the fabric of India. There is deep engagement across the family of apps.
Are these numbers correct, though? Are these numbers broadly correct? That you have about 400 million Facebook users and about 500 odd million WhatsApp users?
I think some of the numbers are numbers that we have disclosed publicly. I have a feeling some of the numbers are numbers that were shared by the ministry.
The IT ministry, yes, that's right.
Yeah. I think it does give you a sense of the scale. And I think to the point that you mentioned about revenue growth, it is happening, Mr. Jain. And it's happening because businesses of all sizes, and especially smaller businesses, are leveraging our platform. And the massive digitization that we have seen in the country, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, where we have more than 600 million people online with access to good, affordable internet.
Sure.
I think companies are looking at that and saying, how do we build businesses? And the biggest movement that we are seeing is in the small business area. And I think beyond sort of revenues and profits, what is really happening is that consumers and businesses are leveraging our platforms to do what is right for them. And I think that's a big positive thing.
So your primary source of revenue remains what? It's primarily advertising?
Yes.
Primarily advertising, okay. But again, just to ask you, Mr. Mohan, again, how do you balance that out with this concern about the privacy of user data and user information, which in a sense is then what is traded or is shared with advertisers to help them better target their ads? How do you negotiate that tightrope?
I think it's a great question. And I think we have changed as a company from 4 or 5 years ago in terms of the extent to which privacy is now at the heart of every product we build.
Okay.
I think there are a couple of things here. One, we made a choice as a company a really long time ago, Mr. Jain, to keep our platforms open. We don't charge users for using our platform. We don't charge businesses for using our platform. One of the interesting things is there are 200 million businesses who leverage our apps. Only 10 million of them are advertisers.
Okay, so but in terms of user privacy though, like, if you could just put it in simple terms, someone who's a Facebook user feels, is my data being shared, disseminated beyond, what would make me comfortable?
And the answer is no. And I think if anything, the direction of the company has been very vigorously to give users even greater control over their data,
right?
Being more transparent about our privacy policy. And one of the big things that has changed in the last few years is privacy is now inbuilt into the development of our products.
Okay.
So the agenda of privacy, safety, and security is not something that we look at post facto and look at, there could be a negative consequence of something happening, we need to fix it.
Right.
It is now inbuilt into products that are designed and how they're built even before they're launched. We think about the potential negative consequences and
before you do it. Let me ask you in conclusion, because we're heading into another round of election season, Mr. Mohan, and that's the time when typically you see an explosion of disinformation, hate and all of that. Are there any particular safeguards that you are putting in or are planning to put in, keeping elections in mind?
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 things. And going back to 2016, and I think the learnings from the US elections, the last 5 years have seen massive movement in terms of how we think about election integrity on our products, as well as transparency, including on ads transparency.
Right.
I think I'm very proud that we as a platform are absolutely at the frontiers when it comes to transparency on political ads. We have worked in the past with the Election Commission and worked with the industry and other pure technology platforms to create a code of conduct.
Right.
And of course, I think our role will absolutely be to ensure that our platforms remain non-partisan and objective and neutral.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the learnings that we have had over the last few years, those are what's going to be deployed for the elections in India over the next few months and years as well, Mr. Jain.
All right. Well, let's see how that plays out. But Ajit Mohan, thank you so much for joining us on NDTV. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.